Lawrence Dam, Nikki Terpstra, everyone in the race went as hard as they could up the climb. There's a pretty big pile up right in front. Hey guys, it's Justin, and I'm here today with a race recap and power file analysis from the UCI Gravel World Series race in Halmstad, Sweden this year, day 2 of the Gravel Grit and Grind weekend of racing. So this 3-day weekend of racing started with a gravel time trial on Friday, the UCI Gravel World Series race on Saturday, and another mass start race on Sunday, but we're just breaking down the Gravel World Series race today. Competition-wise, it was absolutely stacked. For the men, we had Lawrence Dam, Nikki Terpstra, Jasper Åkerlund, Ivar Slick, as well as a bunch of pro guys from road, gravel, mountain, and cyclocross teams from the Netherlands, Denmark, Germany, Finland, Sweden, Norway, all Northern Europe. Absolutely high level of competition. Women had Marianne Vos, and there were a bunch of other really fast athletes throughout the entire event participation. Course-wise, for the Gravel World Series race, we had a 132K gravel course, 90% on gravel, 10% on road, with about 1,500 meters of elevation, but it was really only broken up into 5, 6, 7, 8 climbs or so, and the rest was either flat or downhill. The gravel was more or less normal gravel, I guess. I don't know how to classify it. It wasn't like super chunky, and there weren't any real like single tracky sections, so it made for good race dynamic and race tactics throughout the entire thing. Drafting was definitely a big part of the race, and it was a lot of group racing for sure. So the race started on about a 5 or 6K section of road leading into a hard right-hand turn onto gravel that turned from road to gravel like midway through, and then straight up a 5-minute climb. And the top of that climb was like 6K into the race. So it was all together into the base of the climb and full gas up the climb. Thankfully, I was able to start at the front thanks to a call up from the event promoter, Peter Larson. And I had great position in the road and was able to use some of my road racing background to kind of stay up near the front leading into the climb. Unfortunately, I kind of messed up going into taking that right-hand turn, and I thought the inside line was going to be the faster option. The outside line was the way to go. I thought you would be hitting it too fast and you'd slide off the road into this little guardrail thing, but the guys on the outside were able to kind of square it off and take a straighter line, and I lost a bunch of position right there. So from starting 10th or 20th position going into that right-hand turn, I was probably like close to about 100th, 60 to 100th at the base of the climb. And everyone in the race went as hard as they could up the climb. And the hardest 5-minute section of the race was obviously up that first 5-minute climb, which was an average of 477 and a normalized power of 485. But then that led into the hardest 10 minutes of the race, which was an NP of 435, the hardest 20 minutes of the race, an NP of 387, and the hardest hour of the race, which was an NP of 362, all starting with that 5-minute climb section. So there was about 30 guys or so that made it over the climb with a small gap, and I was probably about 30th to 40th position going over the top of the climb. Thankfully, we had a pretty big second group, about 30, 40 guys. We were able to roll together, and it all came back together after about 15 or 20 minutes of racing for the front two groups. Our lead group was between 60 and 80 or so, which is huge. Started the race with close to 700 or over 700 people, and then our lead group was like still a huge peloton. So after we all connected, after about 15-20 minutes of racing, we more or less just stayed together for the next hour and a half. There wasn't anything super dynamic on the course in that part of the race, so we all stayed together, and this hour and a half normalized 336. So that hour and a half led into this middle section of the race where there were 3 or 4 climbs back to back to back, and that was kind of on paper looking like another decisive point in the race. I may have made a tactical error here, but I thought it was going to help me. I kind of made a little attack on the descent leading into the longest of these climbs. I had about a 10 or 15 second gap with another guy from the Netherlands leading into this first 10-minute climb. And I thought that was going to be my best bet to try and make front group going over that. And unfortunately, they kind of flew by us, like way faster than I was going near the bottom, and I had no chance of holding onto the front group. This broke into a front group of about 20, 25 riders or so, and I ended up in the second group on the road with about 10 or 15 riders after this 10-minute section with an NP of 368. After that, our second group more or less stayed together for the next 50-ish minutes or hour or so before the final 20K. We were rolling through, just trying to get to the end of the race at that point, because we kind of knew we weren't going to make it back to the front group, but we did have a good hope of picking off people that had popped out of that front group. And this 50-minute section normalized 3:06. Coming into the final 20K, we realized we were racing for, I think we were racing for 19th or 20th position on the day. And the final 20K was going to be really hard, because with about 5K to go, there was a really fast descent that was pretty technical because it had a couple hard turns in it. And that the bottom of that descent was about 3 or 4K to go. And it was pan flat to the finish. So if anyone was going to get any distance, it was going to be between 20K to go and like 7K to go. And our group was just attacking each other like no other. And this final 20K section ended up being about 35 minutes and normalized power of 326 for the entire 20K leading into the finish. So our group attacked a bunch. I think we dropped a few guys from our group, but we still had 10, 12 of us or so coming into the finish off of that big descent. After that big descent, it was pretty flat up until about 800 meters to go when we entered this single track section, and there was basically no room to pass once you entered that single track. It was just too narrow. There wasn't any room to pass, and like where you entered was more or less going to be where you finished. You might be able to pass one guy or two guys, and that was going to be it. I pre-rode this section the day before, and I thought I was feeling a little bit better than I did, and made a pretty hard effort right before 1K to go, and kind of got swarmed by the rest of the guys in our group just before we took a right-hand turn into the single track. So I ended up at the back of our group in this narrow section. I was like, well, I guess I'm just gonna finish at the back. Because there's just no way I'm going to be able to pass anyone, especially when I'm gassed after making this my big final effort. We entered the single track, and there's a pretty big pile up right in front, or I don't even know if it was in front. I think it was like midway through this little group, so there were still like 4 or 5 guys ahead. And I was able to pass everyone on the ground and one other guy after that. Ended up finishing the day in 28th overall and 22nd in age group. So, not great, not terrible, but that's racing, right? So, the entire day of racing ended up taking 3 hours, 40 minutes, almost smack on the dot, with an average power of 285 and a normalized power of 332, burning 3,777 kJs. Hard day of racing, but that was some of the most fun and aggressive gravel racing I've ever done. Very high level of competition, and guys were attacking over the top of each other basically the entire day. Raced like a Euro road race, Euro Kermesse, and it seems that's the way most of these Euro gravel races are going. I couldn't be happier about that. There's going to be more recaps coming up. Thanks for watching. Peace.